Hey guys, what's going on? Hope everybody had a good week, and I'm here I'm here to do the Ask the Commish stuff that you guys have been sending questions in all week. I appreciate it. My goal here is really to have fun with it. Um, in no ways am I like an expert for sure, but I think one of the cool things about this game is we all have different styles and different ways of playing it, and I think you can learn a lot from just watching or learning how somebody else does it. So I thought it'd be a cool thing to try, and um, I'm kind of lucky because I get to watch 32 of you play the game all differently. I get to learn from you guys, but I also just kind of as I learn what you guys do, I use it in leagues that I play in, so it's a pretty cool thing. So like I said, just going to share my thoughts. This is more opinion. If something's a fact, like a game feature or something like that, I'll be sure to point that out. But I'm going to start with Toronto because even though Toronto didn't send in this question, it actually kind of inspired what we're doing here. So let me just pull up their question here. Hopefully, you guys can see this all. Hopefully, I'm active and all the things. If somebody can just pop in the chat and tell me that I'm good to go, I would appreciate that. Just gonna load up and double check really quick. All right, it looks like I'm good. Cool. Okay, so all right, back to Toronto. So Toronto, let's see, let's load up Toronto. So Toronto had mentioned in the chat, I think I forget who was talking about it, but they were talking about defensive ratings. And did he send him to AAA? He might have sent him to AAA. Who was your guy, Toronto? I didn't really script this out, as you can see. Who was the guy? Is he hurt? I'm losing my mind. Who was the guy that they wanted to play center field? Because it was not Newman. Well, that's unfortunate. It wasn't Flores. Does anybody remember? Let me see if I can pull up in the chat. Let's see. Range. He talked about his outfielder not having a good center field rating. Let's see. It was Toronto, right? Looking back at our chat because it's still in there. Hold on, I think this is it. Oddly enough, it's in a thread about Huerta's injury. I don't know why. All right. You guys were talking about. Didn't get the vitamin. Hernandez, his top prospect. All right. Sorry about that. I probably should have looked at this ahead of time. Thought it'd be better if I didn't. All right. So he sent him to. All right. He's an A-ball. All right. So the question was, how come this guy who was playing center field, how come he doesn't have a rating? So right here, he was playing him in the minor leagues. And I think one of the things that was clear is that Toronto's management was assuming that based on speed right here, that he would be able to play center field. And one thing, and like I said, it kind of inspired this whole thing. One thing that is a fact, is a game feature, is this stuff here, basic batting ratings, and then speed, stealing, running, all that stuff. Those are offensive ratings. They are not defensive ratings at all. You can have the fastest person in the world, put them in center field, and they're not going to be able to keep up. So the reason that this player is not able to become a center fielder is the range. He just does not have the range to really be an adequate center fielder, even to be a below average center fielder. So this is a guy that with rewards, you're either going to like really pump into that range, or you're just going to get it to an acceptable level and accept the fact that he's a left fielder or a DH when we get there. But that was just something, like I said, it kind of inspired this whole thing, and I figured it seemed like some people didn't know that, and so I think it's good to know. It does say in the manual that speed and the range and such may correlate in terms of decline, as in he might get slower as like his defensive ratings get worse, but that it's not, a direct correlation, meaning a guy who's fast isn't going to be fast in the outfield. It does make sense that that would be a thought that you would have, but this is out of the park and this is not reality. So a fast player could be a slow center fielder. So hope that makes sense. I'm going to jump now into a question or a few questions actually, that we got from the Shelbyville organization. All right, first question says, this one's an easier one. In regards to the DL of an injured player, if his injury is longer than 7 days and the only option in the game is only a 7-day stint, why is that? And then he has kind of bullets underneath. Does it speed up a player's healing if he is on the injured list longer than 7 days? He's got a player. He said the injury is 5 weeks. The only option in the game was 7 days. If he's put on the injured list longer, would it speed up the healing process? So, first of all, there are 3 different injured lists that you need to know. So there is, and these are all OSA, so don't, actually he said I can use a scout, but we're not there yet. So a minor leaguer that's not on your 40-man roster, when they are hurt, they will just go on a 7-day injured list. If they're a minor leaguer and they are on your 40-man, I believe they can go on a 60-day DL. I'm pretty sure. That would be like, like this guy's out for 7 weeks or 4 months. You might want to do that. If an active VBL player gets hurt, your options are 10-day IL, or so like this guy could go, it's 3 days. You don't have to, obviously, but you could pop him on the IL for 10 days, or you could pop him on for the 60 days. The length of time doesn't have anything to do with the healing. Those are just the days. I don't remember if Major League Baseball is at 10 days now. I know that they went back and forth, but that's basically why. It's just a setting in Out of the Park that kind of dictates. Oh, my head's in front of the thing. Hold on. Can you see it now? Does it matter now that I'm not talking about that? But good call out. I'll get better. So back to the injured list. So one thing to note is this guy. So here's the trainer. This is the only thing that I'm aware of that will impact how long or how quickly somebody heals. So in the rehab settings, this guy is decent. He's legendary if it's a leg injury, back injury, average, outstanding with other. That's about it. So if I'm going to assume, and I don't know this for a fact, but if you have a very prone player and a trainer who's like decent at arm injuries, yeah, I think it might take longer for them to heal. If you have, a guy it's rare that he gets hurt and he breaks his leg somehow sliding into second, and you have this guy rehabbing him, yeah, he might come back quicker, but more than likely it's just you won't see a delay. Injuries are points, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into a free agent. To the point about the roster with 3 days, yeah, if you want to IL that player, yeah, you would have to put him for 10 days. So when you have an injury for like 3 days like that, and it's an out injury, I think that guy was an out. Yeah, so he's out. So you could put him on the IL for the 10 days, but then you can't touch him for 10 days. Or you could just, you could right click on him, and then I think I have to be you. So hold on. So if I'm Shelby now, you right click, and you can go to set game strategy. And then if you scroll down here, you can do bench him for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, whatever. And then at least you know he's not going to play during the time that he's hurt, and you don't miss him for an extra 5 days, because if you did put him on the IL, he would be out. Now, one thing also to remember is, like, let's say this guy got injured on day 1 of the sim, and then 4 days went by, and now it says 3 days. If you IL'd him, it would tell you that it's retroactive to when he got hurt. So it's possible, you could clear a roster spot, but something like 3 days, I wouldn't worry about it. I personally am not putting this guy on the IL unless I have, a roster crunch and I want to give a kid a shot. All right. So where was I? Oh, I wanted to show you the injury stuff. So if I go to, I'm going to try and find try and find somebody who's just like awful. All right. So this is based on OSA. If this guy's a star by accident, then he's got good. We won't do him. Let's just want to find somebody that's like really not good. Of course, they all have great stuff, right? Well, this guy. Just want to find a guy that I. All right, this guy. He's got stuff, but you know what? It's sorted the wrong way. That's why. All right, let's do this guy. Here we go. Perfect. All right, so I'm gonna go in the editor on this guy and just show you how injuries work. So this is the back end of every single player. So when a player gets injured, so first of all, if you see right here, every proneness has 1 to 200 scale. So overall, it's just like stuff happens, right? Like it's just going to be that guy who gets nagging injuries. I should have used Huerta. Back, leg, arm. Sometimes you see, like I've seen on the forums and things like that like what is defined as the back could be like, the shoulder. It's just basically, again, they haven't sorted it out by the exact body part, but basically you don't want to see 200 here, right? So when you guys are doing a vitamin on a guy who says fragile, odds are actually at minimum, one of these is going to be probably over 100, probably higher than that. So when you're cutting it down, if this was 150 and you're cutting it down to 75, that's going to make a huge difference. I don't remember what it was, but it doesn't matter. So that's the proneness. But then when they get hurt, I thought this guy, let's see. So when they get hurt, you can see here, it's actually already set in the game as to how long it is. So whatever the diagnosis is, bone chips in the elbow, he could be hurt for 100 days and it's not going to matter, right? Like in a nagging injury, I don't really see that come up too often. My thought is that's probably like if back is more prone and they get, constant herniated disc or something like that. But day-to-day would mean that they can play. We could put that in. I don't know if it's going to update this automatically since he's not on a team, but let's see. Yeah, so day-to-day, he's out for 3 months because I did 100 days. So really the only time that I think the trainer and the player are going to come into effect with the healing is whether or not there's a delay in that process. I hope that answered your question, and I know you have a few more, so I'm going to jump into those. Oh, you asked about finances. That's going to be a fun one. Okay. All right, let's go. So you asked about finances. So he says, my budget is 6.5 million. My payroll is 4.7. Why can't I get out of debt? I understand that winning helps. I've lowered my ticket prices to bring in more fans. Is winning all there is to making more money? The answer is no. So this is one of the areas that I think, um, obviously, Shelby recognizing needs to do better on. And somebody said in the Slack today, I think it was Hartford, said that this game is really a financial game with baseball kind of like hidden in the background. That's kind of true, um, but I think that it's probably a lot easier in terms of like being successful financially than maybe a financial simulator would be. So I'm going to go into your front office here. So you can see here in terms of ticket sales, attendance, revenue per game, Shelbyville is actually way up. So you're in a good spot there. You want to see green here. Where I think you're struggling is if I go into your accounting. So your budget is 6.5, but your expenses are actually 6. You're on pace actually for $7 million of expenses. So for starters, if we're just going to take the example that this is a financial software, you can't do that. You can't do that and be successful, right? You don't have, this isn't like Major League Baseball where you have an owner pumping cash into it no matter what. Um, yeah, all right, good. His Wi-Fi, because I was like, damn. Okay, so your first thing is to lower this 7 million number below your budget. What you're probably doing is you're only looking at your player expenses of 4.7, but you didn't include in your question your staff expenses, your scouting. And one thing I did want to make note of is you have 300,000 here in international amateur free agent. You don't need that money. So 2 years ago, we ditched the international free agent, the pool. They all go to high school or college now. So they are now going to be scouted in your regular scouting. So that 300,000 was money that you were going to use in the pool of players if you had to bid on them. Since you don't have to bid on them, you can go to player development and you can take that out. And I'm just going to do that because there's no reason to have that, and you probably didn't know it, but that improves your expenses right there. Now you're at 6.7. So now you're only, about $200,000 in the hole as opposed to 500,000. You're welcome. So everybody watching, if you have money in international amateur free agent, take it out because it's just wasted money. It's budgeted money that you're spending that you don't need to. So I don't know if your expenses for staff are higher than the norm, but if you're not doing that well, and I look at your staff, based on reputation, your staff might be slightly overpaid. So that's an area to look at. And then obviously in salaries, you're going to want to look at where you can cut some fat. Ultimately, I think what's the most important thing is if you're not going to be a good team, is that, well, number one, I think every team should strive to earn a profit every year. However you can do it, just do it. But if you're a bad team, obviously it's harder because your fans are a little ticked off and they don't want to come. So what can you do? You can do, and he's probably going to love this, but hold on. Let me just make sure I'm not as him. So one of the things that our friends in Omaha have done pretty well is they have some pretty popular players. They're a little bit older, right? So they're getting these veterans. Like Omaha's not looking at Steven Strasburg, Perkins, Whale Bailey, Bo Green, all these guys. They're not looking at them to try and like win a ton of games right now. They're trying to just get things straight, tread water for a little bit until, guys like Jesus Martinez and whoever are ready to go. Because at that point, this team's going to need to be able to afford those guys when they hit arbitration, free agency, all the things. So what I would say is cut the fat on your staff. get some, don't just spend money on players just to have them. And also, if you need to spend money and you're kind of rebuilding, look at ways that you can maybe bring in some older, popular players. If I go into free agency right now, and this is OSA, so let's see if I go. Oh, I'll do popularity actually. So, maybe this guy is somebody that you bring in. He's popular. These guys are fair. They're not going to do a lot, probably because most of the teams that needed guys like that have already kind of grabbed them. But, I think that there's a fine line between just getting, an extremely popular player and being awful still, and maybe getting some popular players and giving your fans something to hope for. You're funny. I just read the chat. So, like this guy, like Calhoun, if I was a team like Shelby, I would bring him in. He's not, again, you're not gonna win the October Classic, but he's a captain. He's got green right here. He's not a great fielder at all, but he might be able to hit, and your fans are going to be pumped to see him. So I would look for guys like that, assuming the price is right. Like, I'm not telling you pay Calhoun $1 million. I'm just saying if he would take like league minimum, why not? Right? If you're going to finish in the bottom, you might as well try and entertain your fans and make some money. So those are a few things regarding the accounting. I just think realistically, you just have to really look at the accounting tab and make sure this number is below this number. So one thing that's kind of exciting for this team right now, and this could change, right? But right now, you are on pace to get a budget of $8.2 million. So that's pretty, I know it's not a ton compared to others, but you're going to get a budget increase because you're bringing in more money. You're projected to bring in 8.1 million, whereas last year you only brought in 5.8 million. So that is because you have more popular players, you lowered your ticket prices, all the things. And then when you look here, you're going to be at, if this happens, you'll be at 8.1 and your expenses will be at 6.4. So you will, be able to dig out. It's just a lot of tinkering and a lot of just figuring out your short term and your long term and making sure that you don't lock into some of those older, less popular players with a lot of money because you might have a younger, more popular guy coming, or there might be a better alternative in free agency. And winning helps too. All right. The third question that Shelbyville gave, this is a doozy. What am I missing in this league to get my team better? So that is a loaded question. I think everybody's different. And I think that this team, I think sometimes, I'm just going to be like brutally honest just watching this, and I think you asked it for honesty, so I'm just going to give it to you. I think you need kind of a who are we type mentality. I think you need to say, what type of players do the Reds only target and stick to that? Meaning, and I'll use, let's use the Union as an example. The Union are, they are who they are. They know, look, they are a speed team. They are not a team that focuses on those big power guys. They field the ball really well. They don't have, they're 31-25. I'm not saying that they are like the best team ever, but I suspect when a player that doesn't fit this structure of a team is available via trade or free agency, it doesn't matter how good they are, they don't fit. And I think that sort of mentality would work really well for Shelbyville because I don't think you know who you are yet. And I think that would be really helpful. And if you look in your division, especially, I think you can kind of see like Cumberland, the Union, the Muck Dogs. The Muck Dogs know that they are going to be built on, strong bullpen, right? So they focus more on that. So I think you need to maybe focus in on an area that you think could be, I guess, more easily identifiable for you and fits into that structure so that you don't get kind of veered in different directions. And I will tell you, I should load up my. Oh, I can't because I would have to. It's fine. In BSA, in Jordan's league, I'm kind of the same way now. I have developed kind of the types of players that I like, and I'll get into that later with another question. But it's just something that I found more enjoyable, and I think that you might find it a little bit more enjoyable too. The other thing is outside of bad luck, because I do think sometimes there's just really bad luck. There is the draft, and the draft for a team like this, you need to knock it out. You need to do the draft really well. You cannot give up draft picks. You have to use that draft to just accumulate talent. And if I look back on past draft picks, I could say Matt Young, right? I'm just sorting this right here. It says he's fragile. He's a first baseman. He looks great, right? I mean, look at his home run power. This is the kind of player I could see the Reds drafting, but then he gets hurt a lot, or he's very one dimensional. He's a first baseman, which is a dime a dozen. And then you're left wondering, how do I get a team around this guy? So I would start to look through the future draft pools and just kind of see where the opportunities are, because you have to assume that you're going to be picking in the top half for the next, let's just say, 3 years. So start looking at these draft pools here on the right and just saying, okay, well, next year this is this past year's, if I go 2028, okay. So catcher, he's in the minor. Yeah, he's in college, so he's a catcher. So big catcher draft coming up possibly presents an opportunity to kind of check that off the box, and it gives you an idea of where you need to hunt for talent. The other thing is, I think it's really important that you kind of look to see if your scout is leading you in the wrong direction. And I think, let me just go back. I think you got a pretty good scout. Darren Erstad. Okay, so fair. That's fine. Yeah, he's a good enough scout. He's a good scout that he's going to lead you to some good picks. He's going to be wrong at times. That's fine. But when I go back to the draft, I see that you said that you suck at drafting, but you just have to just think of it through the eyes of how you are a fan in Major League Baseball, right? So let's just pull up this guy. All right. So OSA is telling you he's 5-star, not, contact's fine. He's fine, right? This profile of batting is fine. His defense, perfectly fine. His personality, I'm not a fan of orange in this, but we're going to get into that because somebody asked about personality. But, I look at the fact that, okay, in 2026, 8.2 WAR, he slugged the crap out of the ball. This year, he's doing the same. I look at that when I'm doing a draft and I say, okay, if OSA and my scout, which I know you said we could use your scout, so let's just see what he thinks. So your scout has them pretty much the same. I look at that as this is a guy that you want to draft. Especially you look injury proneness, he's durable. You can look at injury history. If this had 3 or 4 injuries, I might give it a second thought. I might maybe draft this guy later if I can, but maybe don't put as much stock in the early picks. So it's really just kind of a checkbox. And that's how I do it in the BSA, actually. I look at guys that fit my system. I look at whether or not they have an injury record, because in my mind, and again, I could be doing it wrong. I'm doing it the way that I like to do it. If I see this guy at age 19 has 3 injuries, they could be minor. They could be a blister. They could be whatever. That gives me reason to pause, because my mindset is I want my prospects on the field more often than not. So if they get hurt a lot, they're going to be on the IL. They might not develop, and then they're probably going to be prone when and if they get to the big leagues. Sometimes you just get bad luck, right? Like sometimes Henry Davis, who's durable and is, a monster, just bad luck happens and he gets hit by a pitch, gets concussion, and then for the rest of his career has, post-concussion syndrome. That does happen. It's really bad luck. So that's why I say with Shelby, there are some there is some bad luck involved in it, but I think you just need to really just take your time and start looking at the ways that you can improve. And the ways that franchise can improve is financials, making sure you're spending less than your budget, finding ways to entertain the fans while you're struggling, and then really doing your due diligence in the draft pool. If you do that and you just stockpile talent, at this point in a rebuild, if I was Shelbyville, I wouldn't draft based on position. I would just keep getting the best guys that I could that fit in my model, whatever that is. And honestly, like if I was Shelbyville, I would look at what's winning in my division, right? So, Muck Dogs. Muck Dogs are they hit a lot of home runs. Their bullpen is really good. Their starters are fine, but they're not built on that. They're kind of an all-around team, but really they're going to shut you down late in the game. I look at the Union. Union again score a ton. They're not a big home run team right here. They steal a lot. Their pitching's good enough, but their defense is pretty good. So their defense makes their pitching even better. You look at Cumberland. These are their top three teams. Cumberland's not scoring a ton. They're hitting home runs. Their pitching's average, but their defense is good. So how do I compete with these teams? In my mind, you're either going to outslug them because they're not built on a ton of home runs, or you're going to, or you just got to find a way to build it in whatever you want. So if Shelby, if you want a team that's like super fast, then just focus on drafting players who are fast, who can hit and field, right? If you want to focus on strikeout pitchers, then just do that. Don't get lost in a guy who doesn't fit that mold. And sorry, I got a little bit distracted because I don't know. It looked like I went offline, but it looks like I'm online on mine. So I just want to double check that. I got a little distracted there. A little amateur hour here. I think we're good. Yeah, we're good. All right. Sorry, that was weird. So I hope that makes sense. I know I rambled a little bit there, but just don't look at players that are just good, just sorting by overall. Like what, I look at this, I see, like what, essentially I would just, if I were the Reds, sorry, I'm going to go back to this and I'll wrap it up. If I were the Reds, I would say, what kind of baseball do I like to see and what's going to make this team more enjoyable for me? So in the BSA, what I did was it's all young players almost exclusively, with the exception of like one or two free agents to fill in gaps, because it's really hard, at least in that league, probably in this one too, to just have an entire team of guys that you develop. So you got to just develop however many you can, and then hopefully you've got the money to go out and spend to fill, get yourself a catcher, get yourself a first baseman, whatever it is. So I do like speed, gap. I think almost all of my pitchers, if not all, are developed from within. They're all kind of similar talents. So I hope that helps. And of course, Shelby, I will go further into it with you, but I think it's pretty important when you're kind of lost and you're just struggling to find your way to pick a path and just go for that and just focus in on those specific players. Because, I know you mentioned in the chat that you're not a great drafter, but if you eliminate a bunch of players that don't fit the kind of player that you want, drafting gets a lot easier because, if you're not looking at guys who have, let me just pull up like, let's let's do this. All right, so like Jason Graves. Jason Graves has no positive personality traits, but he's a low leader, low loyalty. Another thing that I do in BSA is I'm big on personality. And again, it's just because that's how I prefer to play. Some teams don't care, right? Some teams will just get all the disruptive, terrible terrible people that they can. As long as they can mash, they don't care. I do. And so that's another thing, right? If you don't want a bunch of players who are greedy, or you don't want to worry about adding work ethic points, then look for players that meet those qualifications at least in the earlier draft picks, right? As you get later, that's when you start to take chances on guys who maybe don't fit that mold, but maybe there's hope for them. So I hope that answers some of your question. I know it's a lot of information. There's no one right answer, but I think sitting down, looking at the teams that are really successful in this league and kind of mimicking what they're doing, pick your style, be smart about the draft, don't give away picks. And by don't give away, I mean don't trade away, but also don't mail it in, right? Like if you're rebuilding, the draft is the most important time for your franchise. So really dig in, start digging into the potential draft pool now and start looking at it so that when it comes up, you're kind of prepared. Another thing that you can do, sorry, I could probably talk about this for a while. You could do, where did I go to? I don't even know who's on my short list. But if you go to your, so player search and short list, you can do a new short list. So if you go right up here and you could just do future draft. And then as I'm going through, and I do this in BSA when I have time. I haven't been able to do it the last few seasons. But, all right, let's just say Henry Davis is a guy that we're going to want. I'm going to right-click on him, go to shortlist, add to future draft. And now when the draft pool comes out, I can kind of go back to that list, look at the players who are on it, see how they have progressed, and figure it out from there. All right, so I'm going to jump off this question again. We can talk more later. Happy to dive in more, follow-up questions, whatever you want to do. All right, next question is from Napoleon. Napoleon asks if there's a certain pitch mix or combination that I look for in a starter, especially when it comes to adding the third or fourth pitch when you have a stud-looking reliever you drafted with 2 great pitches and starter stamina. And do things like velocity and arm slot affect what pitch will be more effective for that guy? So one thing to note is in the BSA, I don't get to add the pitches. So I actually only get to really see that in the VBL when you guys do it. So I don't really have experience in being successful with it because I don't get to do it. But one thing I would say, and I'm going to go back to the free agents, the crummy ones. One thing I would say is ground ball pitchers need ground ball pitches. So, if you're looking at, we'll go to this guy. So he's neutral. So let's just say that said ground ball, right? That he was a ground ball pitcher. I'm not going to add, I'm going to focus on like adding things like a sinker to him. So this is what it looks like. This is the back end, right? So he has a fastball and sinker, and I want you to look, and I think you can see it. I'm just going to double check on the screen when it goes to it on my other one that you can see the stuff here on the bottom right. I think you can. All right, perfect. So let's just make this, actually, I'm going to make a note that I need to delete this guy because I'm about to make him a stud. I don't want somebody to Armando Avila. All right. I don't want somebody to go get him. Okay. So let's just say we make that 200 and we make that 200, and I'm gonna zero out. I'm gonna zero out these. Let's just make this, just for the sake of math, we're gonna make this 100, 0, and 0. Okay. So each pitch, so right now you can see His stuff is better against lefties. He is a lefty. He's got 72 stuff against righties. These are things that, they definitely play into how well this pitcher is going to perform. What was his velocity? His velocity is 92 to 94, and his arm slot is normal. So if I added, let's just say I add a cutter, so his potential stuff is a 123, that bumps him up to a 142. If I add a slider, bumped him up to a 149. If I add a, where are we? No, that was a curveball. The last one was a curveball. Sorry. Now I'm going to add a slider, 149 again. Changeup, 152. So right now I would know, and obviously you don't get to do this, but it kind of just shows you the difference between how much a pitch can change a pitcher. A splitter would bump him to 153. Again, my thought is he has the sinker already. A splitter is more of a ground ball pitch. I know he's neutral, but I think he becomes more of a ground ball type pitcher there. If we do one thing, again, this is just me. I try and avoid sidearm pitchers now in BSA because I think I've had two and they just are never good. I think of this guy, Lance Poole, he had all the ratings. He should have been awesome. And I just chalked it up to him being sidearm. But let's just see what happens here. So you can see that actually changed his stuff alone. So I just changed him to sidearm with the same 100, 200. And now he's at a 94. His stuff against righties diminished, actually. And his potential is still a 123. So what happens if I give him... It looks like that's the same. I've never actually looked at if stuff changed based on... Well, actually it does, right? Because the splitter we saw was a 153 potential when I made it 100, and that's a 142 now. So it's probably not a great answer to this in terms of how the game actually plays. I think my thought would be think of the type of pitcher that he is and think about what works, right? Obviously, the harder that they throw, the more you're going to want those sinker and cutter type pitches. If they throw softer, maybe it's a curveball type pitcher. If they're fly ball pitchers, ground ball pitchers, you want things that would induce more ground balls and things like that. But I think the only thing I can really give you in terms of advice for me is avoid sidearmers and submarine. I don't know if we have. I think there was somebody in the draft that was a submarine. Somebody might have to mention that in the comments. I'm pretty sure there was a submariner in the draft. Can't remember who it was. We'll get back to that. All right. So, all right, next question. I wasn't sure if this person wanted to be anonymous, so I'm just not going to say who they are. You've mentioned a few times that for players with VBL and even upper minors experience that we shouldn't rely on our scouts so much. I assume you mean we should rely on the track record of a player's stats at that point rather than the ratings. Does that mean that you discount a player's high school and college stats? And if you place less reliance on a player's high school and college stats, is that more on the downside? In other words, if a player has good amateur stats but middling ratings, you might rely on the ratings more. But if a guy hit 200 in high school, but the scout loves him, you might be skeptical due to the lack of statistical record. Great question. This, I think, again, falls into the category of... I'm actually going to just delete this guy, otherwise there's going to be... All right. It's a great question, and this might be an opinion thing again. For me, and I'm just going to stick on Shelbyville here. For me personally, I do not like drafting early. Again, I definitely differentiate early draft picks and later ones, but I do not expect I see the question in there. I'll get to that in a second. I do not expect a player who did poorly in high school or college and has great ratings to all of a sudden be a star. I just don't. I view guys who are top high school and college players are more likely to become top VBL players. I think if you look at like some of the top players in the VBL and you look at their amateur stats, I think that you'll see a correlation there. Again, though, I think the thing with this game is a lot of wonky things happen, and you also have to remember that you guys are adding through reward points, right? So that plays a huge role into it, and it's something that sometimes the stats won't work. What I mean by minor league is like, so I think his scout was pretty well in the minor leagues. If I go to like Corpus Christi, if I go into Corpus Christi's minor league, I don't think I'm on his scout right now, but I see this guy. He is OSA says he's 2-star. He's 3.5 potential. I look at him as okay. He did really well in high school. He was a 5-WAR, 3-WAR player. Rookie league, 1.8 WAR in only 46 games, and right now he's doing pretty well. I look at that as more validation for the scouts report than like trying to pick a side, if that makes sense. So I think that minor league scouting is important, but I think as they start to play games, this kid is only 17. He's probably going to be in minor league baseball for 3 to 4 years. If he's struggling at higher levels and my scout and OSA maybe disagree, I would probably lean towards whichever side thinks that this kid's more of a bust. So the question in the chat was, do you know if some pitches in out of the park tend to develop less well than others? I know, so Pacifica mentioned the changeup. I've heard that. That one's harder for me to really look at because I think a lot of people's knowledge from it comes from when we add pitches, because the expectation that, you were taking the second pitch and building a third pitch off of it, and then that third pitch doesn't develop, I think is easier to see than like in my experience of just looking at a pitch repertoire and something, the changeup or whatever just doesn't come to fruition. But I think changeup and circle change are probably a good bet to be the hardest to develop. It may be the knuckleball and screwball and stuff, but those are so rare that I don't think that that's worth, worrying about. So I hope that answers it about minor league. It's really it's more of I like to use my scout for amateur and I like to use my scout for going out and finding international, which I know the Union team doesn't really love or doesn't have great luck in, but I just come to the conclusion that I feel like I can spot a good big league player based on the statistics and the basic overall, even the OSA view. I kind of feel the same way with minor leaguers when they have enough games played in the minor leagues that I can kind of say, okay, OSA is saying that this guy, he looks pretty good. His stats look pretty good. I'm going to say he's pretty good, right? I'm not going to worry about if my scout says this guy sucks. I'm going to be like, well, 2 against 1, essentially. That's kind of how I actually use the scouts, is I kind of use OSA, my scout, and statistics as kind of like a three body scouting department, because I do value OSA. Some people like totally do not value it at all, but I do, because it's an opinion, and if it validates your scout, great. If OSA and your scout totally disagree and stats are unclear, that's usually a place where you either take a chance late in the draft or I just avoid it, because I really like when OSA and my scout are on the same page and stats back it up. All right. Next question was, this one's great. There are some owners in this league who are consistently good year after year. Is there anything that they do that distinguishes them from the owners who are more up and down? Do they spend more time studying the game? Do they draft better, trade better, identify talent better, manage their finances better? All the above. In short, what sets someone like Kansas City apart from Bugaboo, and they do put in parentheses, Bugaboo is clearly a good GM, built an awesome team that just didn't quite win, so not trying to call him out, but Kansas City had similar set of frustrating playoff finishes and was able to sustain it over a long period of time. I think first and foremost, I think it comes down to time. And I think, Bugaboo being used as the reference here is a good, he doesn't have all the time in the world to play the game. That's not to say that everybody does, but some people just have more time and want to get different things out of this game than others. I think if everybody had the same amount of time and could just sit in front of their game for all day, I think everybody would probably just battle for division titles every year. But, if I take Bugaboo, they decided to be that team that's going to rebuild in spurts because that's what their time allows, right? So they can find talent, they just can't sustain it. And I do think with Bugaboo, they were a good example of you can rebuild and be successful and find all those studs. But if these years precede your great years, if you're 39, 41, 32, 31, 50, all these terrible years, you're going to spend so much time trying to get your fans back that by the time you're, on the brink of a championship, you're going to lose half your roster because you can't afford them because you dug a financial hole. So I think, we're all at different levels of playing this game. I think some people obviously understand it better than others. I just think it's, I think some people have kind of figured out what they like too, right? We go back to what we talked about with Shelby. I think, if you look at the Union and in BSA, I'll say like they know pretty well what type of team they're usually trying to get. Usually it works. Sometimes it doesn't and they get frustrated. But, you mentioned in the question like Kansas City's playoff struggles. I personally don't look at playoff struggles as a negative because realistically, every team, if I look right now, great team, great team, great team, great team, great team, great team, very good team, great team, great team, great team. Like if you're trying to win a championship, you're gonna have to beat at minimum probably definitely two, but at least possibly 3 to 4 great teams. So I kind of look at it as just get to the playoffs and then you just hope for the best. And if you can do that consistently, then that's what sets you apart. And I think what a lot of the really good teams have done, if you look at them, if you look at Kansas City, you look at Southside, you look at the Muck Dogs, Camels, even the Bananas, the Pants. I think if you look at them, if I left anybody out, I'm sorry. But if you look at them, they know who they are. They draft pretty well, and they handle their finances really well. They're rarely in a financial hole. And I think part of it is also, we talked in Slack today about Puerto Rico, kind of cutting loose on some players. These teams are generally pretty good at saying goodbye to a player, right? Like they don't buy into the later years of the player, which is typically, I think, when you're going to start to lose money. So, I can't really answer why they're better than, you or somebody else. I think it's just, they don't waste draft picks. They know what kind of team they're aiming for. They know how to make money in this game, which is you cannot be good in this game if you're not making a profit. I think they just they understand the value of players and how to get the most out of them. And that doesn't mean that they make bad trades that hurt others. They just they get a guy who's valuable, but then they drafted a replacement, and then they're able to just trade the older valuable guy off and get something of value, and then bring up their young third baseman. It's just one of those things, and it's hard being good at this game. So when you see teams that are consistently good, I think it's you just got to tip your cap to them and try and just take anything you can off of them and look at their team and try and figure out what they're doing that you're not, and see how you can improve. But I definitely think the draft is probably number one. I think all those teams, if you really look, all those teams understand what they're trying to do in the draft. All right, Hartford asks, how do you tell when a guy is ready for the next level, and how do you differentiate stats and performance? He's got a minor leaguer here that he references, Koo. His stuff is only 80, 94, scout, yada, yada. Seems close. What metrics do you use to determine readiness? All right, so that's this guy. So first and foremost, I think what's important is you got to have a spot for him, right? So if you have a bullpen spot open and you have a guy who is close to ready, then bring him up. For me, right away, first thing that my eye gravitated to was the fact that he has a potential of 80 control, but he's at a 57. That's pretty far off. And if I look at his stats, he's improving. You can see that. Let me open that up. You might not be able to see this with where my screen is, but first thing I would look at with a pitcher is how are his walks, especially when the gap in the rating is that high. So 4.3, 5.7, 4.3, 3.4. He's improving, but I don't think he has big league control. So that would be the first thing. It looks like his fourth pitch needs to be developed, but I think in terms of stuff, his stuff will play at the big leagues. He has a side armor, which is pretty funny because we were just talking about them. So I think in my mind, another thing that I would do, because you mentioned metrics, like let's say this control was 79 out of 80 and everything else was the same. But he was performing to this level. I would look at his morale and I would try and see, is he ticked off at the fact that he's in AAA? Is, something like that. Find out if something in the morale is kind of making his performance decline or not meet expectations. Because it could just mean, especially if his expectation is to be at the big league level, that could impact things too. And then at that point, you just got to try and go for it. At some point, if OSA and your scout are saying this guy's ready, stats aren't showing it, but you're seeing blue and green and all the things, and he looks a little ticked off, you got to just decide if you want to go for it. In that scenario, I would go for it if I had a bullpen spot. Let's see. Oh, one other thing. Let me just pull up. Another metric I use is I do use the batting average with balls in play. So I don't know if you're going to be able to see it on the screen, but his is 281, 285. Sorry, I've got something in my throat. It's brutal. I also look to see if there's bad luck at play. For him, I don't see any. But like if this was like 385, 381, a lot of teams don't focus on defense in the minor leagues, so I might look at that. But again, we already identified that walks were probably his main problem. If his walks per 9, K per 9, all the home run per 9 were fine, but he was giving up a lot of hits, and that batting average with balls in play was like through the roof, I might look at it more as a product of the team rather than a product of whether or not he's ready. All right, hope that answered that. Let me just see. Okay, how do you determine slump versus suck? I have an idea, but looking at Muirhead, I think that's how we would pronounce it, which is funny because I think you just traded him. He's a fringe player who shouldn't be starting due to the Turner injury, but he's also batting 170. So I actually just alluded to that, and you did trade him. Where did you trade him? Stratford, I think. Yeah, there he is. So for starters, he's in a slump, right? So he's got the icicle next to his name, so that's one way you determine it. So one thing to look is, okay, so his contact is a 52 according to OSA. That's pretty low. So he's, not making a ton of contact. When he does, good things are happening, obviously. But if I look at his, so again, I'll just shout this out just in case you can't see it because of my head here. But okay, so his batting average on balls in play with Hartford this year in 47 games was 188. That's pretty low. And you can tell that that's pretty low because his total for his career, he's a 295. When you have enough of a sample size, you could just look at that, right? So he is suffering from a lot of bad luck for starters. Let me just pull up here if he. Where did his. All right. Strikeout percentage. He's striking out a little bit more than what he used to. He was at 26.8%. He was 21 the year before, 19. So yeah, he might be declining. He might be struggling there. One thing. So basically, to answer your question is, and I'm dealing with this in the pub a ton. If you're in pub and you sort my batting average balls in play, it's insanely low. It's like, yeah, like, and I want to just throw the team in the garbage, but you have to hope that if there's a baseball card that says that they're pretty good, when the ball's put in play, they're dealing with a little bit of bad luck. So I would say if he didn't have that little slump icon next to his name, I would say it's definitely bad luck, but he's probably, oh, you're going to see that. Sorry. Now we'll all know how good he is. I knew that was going to happen at least once. I'm sorry. Now you get to see how good a player is. So funny. All right. Well, what I was going to do is I was going to show you. We're going to see Muirhead get traded so fast now. All right. So this is a guy, Arias. So I wanted to show you this. So this is the rating that you guys don't see on players, which kind of impacts contact and impacts that statistic that we were just talking about. So, in my opinion, this is one of those stats. Again, this is 1 to 250. So I think you probably want it 90 plus, but you guys don't get to see that. And that is one of those. Don't worry. Pacifica, you'll see it on the recording. I just showed the editor on Muirhead's. I showed this screen, but it was fast and whatever. I can't do anything about it. But what was I going to say? Oh, so this is, you guys never see this in the ratings profile, but it does play a factor in contact, but also plays a factor in kind of how good the batting average on balls in play is. So again, if you see a consistent record of a low batting average on balls in play, and that's something to keep in mind with the draft too, is if you see a guy who's not performing year after year and that batting average on balls in play is really low, if it's really low year after year, you might want to think that guy probably has a low behind the curtain rating. If it was 300 for 3 years and then 210 in year 4, he might be a sneaky draft pick because maybe he just had an unlucky year. All right, that was awesome. I can't believe I showed it, but I was thinking about this and I was like, I really hope I don't hit editor on anybody who's like worthwhile, but I'll kick myself about that later. Okay. Napoleon asked, and we're almost done here. Personality ratings, a couple guys get work ethic upgrades to normal and then have them drop again. I've also seen guys change. It's great when they become fan favorites or captains, but equally terrible when you sign them long term and they become disruptive or outspoken. Is there any underlying number you see as the commish that may give an indication if a player has a personality rating that will steadily decrease? So a few teams actually saw the work ethic thing happen. It does happen. I don't know why it happens except to tell you that I think that all of these personality traits have something to do with it. So this is the guy we were just looking at. He's unmotivated. That's his personality. He's got 4 orange characteristics. So let's just say everything looked great with him, but you change his work ethic to be normal. So whenever you guys do that, I believe so I always change it to 110, right? And then I refresh this. So now he's got a normal personality. So he's not unmotivated, but he's still got some struggles in his personality. My bet, and I haven't looked at this because this was something that I think is 22 specific or more so. I know it's happened in the past, but it happens more in 22. I think more orange can lead to more problems with the personality long term. So again, this is kind of how things look on the back end. These are 1 to 200. I think if this is down to, is it 69? No, I think it's 59 then. I think 59. Yeah, 59 starts a low work ethic, but it could go down all the way to 1, right? So, but when you change it, I change it to 110. So anything can happen from there. I change it to 110 just to give a lot of room. So if somebody drops from a 110 down to a 59, then my bet, again, not looking at all the players that happened to, my bet is that orange personalities came into effect there. I would just say, oh, look, we've got like a person or a bot. That's cool. Again, though, I look for more positive personalities. So, a guy like this, I even without the work ethic edit that we're allowed to do, I probably don't look at trying to bring that personality into my team. And then, with turning into a fan favorite and all that, if these are green and he performs, that's probably more likely how he's going to become a fan favorite or a captain or whatever, right? I don't think somebody becomes a captain if they're not a good leader, if they're not loyal to the club, and all the things. So I think, again, look for green as much as you can. If you have some orange, make sure it's offset somehow, right? Again, if this guy had all these 4 orange things, but he was a 99 across the board, yeah, I'd be tempted to take him. I honestly probably wouldn't take him. But that's just me, again, because I figured out this kind of team I want. But that hopefully answers your question to the best of my ability. I think that's one of the things that's just trial and error. All right. Pacifica asked, how much, if at all, does morale or team chemistry affect performance or development? I think so. It's hard for me to say definitively, but again, I go back to like the kind of team that I try to get. So my minor leagues, I try and replicate what I have in the minors to what I want in the majors and BSA. So I try to, at the draft, I'm trying to find all the personalities that mesh. I'm trying to find the staff that mesh well. My only thought behind that is I figure if the game developers have personality traits, have a team chemistry button, and have a personnel chemistry button, then there's a reason. So I just don't want that to negatively impact my players. I think ultimately the team chemistry here is probably how you can tell if things are impacting play, right? So if your team chemistry is low, I guess lower than content is probably no good, but and this guy's ticked off about it and his performance is showing, then it's probably playing a role because maybe his personality is more about maybe he wants a better team chemistry. I don't think it goes, you go further into your question about like, does it turn a 70 contact into a 65? I'm not sure. I haven't seen any evidence of that, but I think as we watch games being played live more, we might be able to see it because they pop up the ratings. And those ratings do fluctuate over time. So you could be right. That's something, again, I kind of just picked, this is how I want to do it with team chemistry. I just go for it and it works for me. So I just kind of do it. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it works. So let me just see. Yeah, and that again, that's not to say like my way or the highway. You could probably have a team of Hall of Famers that all hate each other and win a championship. And God bless you if you do it. I don't want to do it that way. So I just avoid it altogether. I avoid having to find out if your question is right or wrong, basically. And then lastly, so today Austin asked in Slack about firing the manager. So I'm going to go to Austin really fast because I just want to point out Okay, so with staff, I'm looking at three things. So number one, your staff cohesion is ecstatic. Um, you have some works well with. I try the best I can to have struggles with be zeros across the board. If it's a zero in scouting and trainer, I'm less worried about it. Or if it's like a one, I mean, if like, everybody hates a personable guy, but your scout's personable, I care less about that. But I try and get all these lined up the best I can to make them work well together. I try and have everybody do just enough, right? So I don't try and overload the staff because if like Chipper did all of these jobs, I think your cohesion would drop. And then so then if I look at Adrian Brown and I go to relationships, I can see all of your pitchers pretty much kind of sort of hate him, but your hitters love him. So for me, if I think I'm Austin and I say, okay, well, my team is built around basically these guys, then I want to keep those guys happy. And then I would maybe find a bench coach to make these guys, the pitchers, happy. So if you're struggling, but your cohesion's really good, the players that are most important to you love your manager, and financially, everything's working out because you don't want to just pay for a new manager when you're only paying 60 grand for him. I would maybe not fire him, but I get why you might want to impulsively fire him if you're not living up to standards. And then the other thing is like the strategy, right? So I would look at their roster strategy, just what, if I'm a team that favors defense and he favors offense, then he's probably not the right guy for me. So I look at the relationships, I look at the relationships with the players, with the coaches, and then the overall roster strategy. And then from there, I just try and find the best guy that I can. Whether he's inexperienced or he's legendary, I don't really care. Boring fact. That is a boring fact. Thank you. All right. I think that was it for this first one. I'm surprised that nobody asked me how a budget is determined and how our owners choose what the budget is, but maybe we finally got 30 on that one. This went about 15 minutes longer than I thought. It is what it is. I appreciate you all popping in. I hope you learned something. We're going to try this again in the future. Thank you all to everybody who sent in questions, who popped in the chat, and enjoy your weekend, and we'll be back with games on Sunday. See you guys.